Joining us on our Book TV set now, though, is Emory Professor Carol Anderson. Here's her book. It's called White Rage, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide. Professor Anderson, what do you mean by white rage?
And what I mean by white rage is not what we often think of, which is like the Klan and burning a cross. But white rage really are those policies coming out of the Supreme Court, out of Congress, state legislatures, that are triggered by African Americans' advancement toward their civil rights. And when you see those major advancements, you see all of a sudden this policy backlash that comes up, figuring out how to undercut that. That's the rage. It's cool, it's methodical, it's subtle, and it is corrosive, and it is absolutely destructive.
Have you seen it time and again in your research?
Yes, so I track it from the end of the Civil War, because here you have this moment where African Americans move from being property to being human beings, which is, whoa, and then from being human beings to citizens. And with that, a call on the nation's resources as citizens. This massive backlash comes from out of the White House under Andrew Johnson, but also from state legislatures that work to undercut that advancement, to undercut and to put African Americans back into a new type of slavery. I track it with the Great Migration, the Brown decision, the Civil Rights Movement, and then the election of Barack Obama.
Let's go to 2008 then.
Yeah.
What did you see in your research?
Oh, what I saw was, there was this moment, this like fleeting moment of hope that the nation had really crossed the racial Rubicon. And instead, what happened was this massive policy backlash, particularly in terms of voter suppression. With Obama's election, Obama had managed to bring in about 15 million new voters into the electorate. I mean, and this is the thing we should embrace as a democracy, where we've got 15 million people who had heretofore been on the sidelines, and now they feel vested. They have a stake in this democracy. They have a stake in how this nation works and who their elected representatives are. This we should embrace as a democracy. Instead, what happened was a systematic targeting of those voters in terms of voter suppression laws. And it got cast the way white rage works, by wrapping that voter suppression in the language of democracy. We have to protect the integrity of the ballot box. We have massive voter fraud. We need to ensure that we don't have that voter fraud. Except we didn't have the voter fraud that they're talking about, where somebody goes in and impersonates somebody to vote and swing an election. We've only had 31 cases out of 1 billion votes since from 2000 to 2014. This wasn't about voter fraud. But what these laws did was to begin to systematically suppress the black vote and the Latino vote and the youth vote, because even in these trying to targeted hits, it radiates out. There is massive collateral damage.
What about in 2016? What was this election about in your view?
Oh, this election was white rage. This election was white rage. There was this moment. It was a referendum on what kind of nation this would be. Would this be a nation that embraced the diversity in this nation? Would it embrace African Americans and Latinx people and Asian Americans and Muslims and LGBTQs? Would it? Or would it be a nation that said, what we really want in terms of making America great again would be to go back to the good old days? And if you ask, really point, what are those good old days? They're days when blacks couldn't vote. They're days when women couldn't vote. And so you get this driving urge for policies that can take us back to be very exclusive, so that you have access, white access, to the resources of the United States. This is a white rage election.
So if somebody says to you, I supported Donald Trump, do you have an immediate assumption about that person?
Yes.
And what is it?
And that assumption is that race and racism and white supremacy was driving that vote. Because here is a man who has basically hit every third rail there is in the American body politic, and his voters did not move away. For instance, this is a man who says, you know, my favorite book in the Bible is 2 Corinthians. This is a man who violates the basic tenets of Christianity, which is to recognize your sins and ask for forgiveness. He says, I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't do that. And the evangelical state. We talk about this is election about economic anxiety, except his voters have, you know, the average is they make over $70,000 a year. And there's a recent study that says it would take African Americans 228 years to equal the wealth of whites in the United States today. So economic anxiety, This is a man who denigrated the military. Again, another third rail when you think about it. But those patriotic voters did not move away. This is a man who is very clear about sexual assault. And those voters did not move away. And so, and in terms of economic anxiety as well, we have a man whose economic policies are not about helping the populist, the working class. He bankrupted, he proudly bankrupted small business owners. And those voters did not move away. So once you begin to check off all of the things that should have and could have derailed his presidency, what you're left with is a man who is endorsed by the KKK, where white nationalists, white supremacists say, we really like his policies. He's going to give us the kind of nation we want. And that nation is predicated on those policies. And what I mean by that is that often we think of it in terms of the violence that happens. That's how we think of rage, as violence. But those policies sanction the violence. Those policies mean that brutality can happen, and there's not any kind of consequence in a criminal justice system because the policies say this is okay to terrorize this population.
So when you see that he wins a Pennsylvania and a Michigan for the first time since the 80s, why is it not about economics? You don't see the economic isolation, maybe?
Yeah, and so and where economics plays in is you've got to understand again economics as a cover for race, so that I think that one of the things that is driving this in this kind of multicultural world that we're in, multicultural nation that we're in, is this sense that I may be okay making $70,000+ a year, but as more blacks and Latinos and Asians and Muslims are seeking access to the resources, what does that mean for my grandchildren? What does that mean for my sister's kids? I think that, again, is the mask where economics plays in. But what is not clear is that what white rage has done is by systematically undermining wide swaths of the population, it has actually undermined the viability and strength of this nation, so that we see things in this really narrowed zero-sum game when it doesn't have to be that way at all.
Carol Anderson, where did this book, White Rage, come from?
The book emerged out of the uprising in Ferguson. Let me back up a bit. Actually, I started playing with this idea back in 1999 with the killing of Amadou Diallo by the NYPD. And here you have a black man who steps out of his apartment to go get something to eat, and 4 New York police officers gun him down. 41 bullets, 19 of them hit. I'm watching Nightline with Ted Koppel, and Rudy Giuliani is being interviewed. And he barely mentions Amadou Diallo. Instead, what he says is, my policies are working. New York is safer than it has ever been. And I have the most restrained, best behaved police force in the United States. And I'm thinking, your policies are working, and you've got an unarmed man with no criminal record who has just been gunned down. That's not safety. There's something going on here. And so as a scholar, I'm continuing to work, continuing to think, da da da. And then Ferguson blows in 2014. And all of the pundits, regardless of the ideological stripe of the venue, are asking, why are black people burning up where they live? And they're talking about this black rage as buildings are on fire. And I'm shaking my head no, going, this is white rage. This is white rage. I had lived in Missouri for 13 years. I saw what policies could do. I saw how they undermined access. I saw, for instance, how in a city like Ferguson that is 67% black, but the voter turnout was only 6% for African Americans in the 2013 municipal election. Think about the kinds of policies that it takes to turn 67% of the population into 6% of the voting population, of the voters. I saw a school district that had been on probation for 15 years, that we were willing to send children through a school system that was basically not accredited, an entire generation. And I saw a police force that looked at that population not as people, citizens there to protect and serve, but as revenue generators. How much can we extract from them? Those policies that systematically undermine black access to their civil rights, that's what I saw, and that became the genesis of this book. First, I wrote about it in a Washington Post op-ed where I track from Reconstruction through the Obama's election, and then I expanded it in this book.
What's your day job?
I am a professor of African American Studies and History at Emory University, and I teach civil rights and human rights and U.S. Cold War foreign policy.
How long have you been doing that?
Oh, I have been teaching since 1996, so wow, 2 decades.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. And I saw those policies there too. Yeah.
So it's not just the South necessarily?
Oh, no.
In your view?
No.
Did you grow up in an integrated or a segregated area?
I grew up, when we moved in, my father was a military man, had been career military. And so after serving 20 plus years in the Army, he moved the family to Columbus, Ohio, because he wanted my brother to go to Ohio State. And when we got there was a house, I remember, on Oakland Park that my mother wanted, and the real estate agent said, no, you people don't live there. I'll show you where you people live. And so we bought a house in a neighborhood that by the time that was integrated, within 2 years there was only one white family left. And so my elementary and my junior high were almost predominantly black, and then I was bused in high school.
Carol Anderson, professor at Emory and author of this book, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide. We have a longer program on booktv.org with her from Ferguson, Missouri that we taped, so in case you're interested, you can type her name into our website. Just type in Carol Anderson book, and you'll be able to see that full program. Thanks for being on Book TV.
Thank you so much, Peter.
And our coverage from Miami now continues, and we want to introduce you to a novelist, but he is also the winner of this year's